Thank you once again for joining us after this video, and thanks a lot, Sujum. This was very, very interesting, and time flies when we're having interesting interventions, and I think we all felt the same way. You touched upon some key issues. I think precision medicine and many keywords that I think we will touch upon later on as well. I will just remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that if you have questions, use Slido, and we'll try to get as many of those answered at the end of this session. To both Fatima, I see that you're with us from Denmark. Very happy to see that you are now live here in Seoul as well. To Suyeon, thanks both of you once again for a very, very interesting start of this second session. We have literally changed scenes. We are back in the second sofa session, but with today's restrictions, that means also chairs. But we will have just an interesting discussion anyway. I think in addition to Fatima and Suyeon, we have been joined by my good friend and colleague, Jakob Hallgren, the Swedish ambassador to Korea. You met him at the first session, of course. And to give a little break to Suyeon and Fatima, I think I will maybe challenge you first, Jakob, a little bit on perhaps on the Swedish perspective. Anything that you, based on these discussions, perhaps also on the first part, maybe some insights from a Swedish perspective regarding gene biobanks and if there are any parallels that you find suitable at this stage.
Thank you, Frode, and also thank you to Fatima and Suyeon for really fascinating and inspiring presentations here tonight. I'm obviously not an expert, but I can definitely see the importance of the research that you are doing, and the importance of biobanks and genome research, and everything that you're doing on antibiotics resistance, etc., is clearly what we need to do for the future to face the challenges and the risks, kind of gloomy risks that we touched upon. I can also say I see that there is much in common here with the state of research in Korea, also thinking of what was said in the first session, and in the Nordic countries. So if there isn't a lot of collaboration already, let's try to build on that and improve and deepen that. And I also think that one takeaway for me listening to this is really the importance of open science. That science, like these biobanks, are really global common goods that we need to protect and make even more accessible, because only global collaboration will really make us face or enable us to face challenges. We haven't talked so much, we only referred briefly to the current COVID situation. As far as Sweden is concerned, I think that we have also our contribution to some of those global goods, and one that I would like to highlight is the Human Protein Atlas, which is actually a huge database based at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, which maps essentially all human proteins. I think there's some like 27 or 30,000 in different categories, and they can of course be used to study potential biomarkers in various diseases, various forms of cancers, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, etc. And that is a global common good that many researchers, I'm sure you may have heard of it. So that is the contribution from my side. And finally, just what you mentioned here at the end, and we touched upon it a little bit in the first session as well, and that is these ethical considerations and how we ensure that the incredibly necessary and almost existential research that is done in genome research and also in biobanks, etc., gains the trust of those who really need it the most, us, the ordinary people who are not the experts driving this research. So those are a couple of reflections so far from my side. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Jakob. And I think we're touching upon the same thing from different aspects, from all aspects actually, and that is the keyword cooperation and collaboration, which I think is something that will at least we'll take with us from this evening in many areas, whether it's ethical, whether it's medicine, whether it's research. So I think that's a key takeaway. Let me turn now to our two main speakers, Fatima and Yoon. Maybe first to you, Fatima, from your perspective, you mentioned some key challenges in the global medical area for the time being. And maybe this is a somewhat strange question now in the midst of the corona crisis and a pandemic. But if you, apart from that, what do you think is the biggest health challenge that the global society is facing for the time being?
I think there are several, and one of them is AMR. But of course, I think every one of us talk from their own field of expertise. So it's not only in the health health sector. It's also within like global change, the global warming, the lack of clean water. We have a lot of problems, and it can be quite depressing to know that there are all of these problems. But the main message here is that we all need to concentrate on our own expertise and try to find solutions from here. So in my perspective, of course, AMR is an extremely important and maybe the new COVID-19 in the future, because it's coming, and it's coming slowly, and we have known it for a long time. But what is so interesting with it is that we have lived with it over a couple of years. It didn't hit suddenly like with the COVID-19, and that's why we didn't get this shock of immediate acting to it. And I think that can be quite dangerous, that we don't have this shock of immediate reaction.
Thank you very much, Fatima. But maybe a follow-up on that. We know that the global society is facing quite a few challenges. I mean, the climate change issue is on everybody's lips for the time being. We need to do something. Is it a little bit, in your opinion, the same thing with the AMR, that we have to be knee-deep in the situation and really be stuck in the situation before we actually will be able to solve the problem?
That is human mentality, that we need to be in some kind of real danger. We need to feel it close before we act. And I think the COVID-19, even though it's very tragic for the people who have lost their dear ones, it's a warning for us, and there has been a lot of awareness lately that, okay, so some of these problems that we thought are far in the future and we shouldn't think of them, they are more close to us than we anticipated. So I think there is some positive message in what we have seen with the COVID-19, that we are more aware and more of us are willing to do more about these problems that seemed far away before.
Thank you, Fatima. So I don't know if you have any other perspectives than Fatima shared?
I want to add some in Korean situations. We have a tuberculosis problem, especially for tuberculosis. Antibiotic and AMR problem is very severe, as you know, more severe in the tuberculosis. But in North Korea, we have a very severe AMR tuberculosis situation. Right. So I think the AMR is very important issues, especially in Korea, about the tuberculosis situation.
But maybe, again, do you think that the COVID-19 pandemic, has it sunk in a way that we need to change pace, we need to change focus in order to speed up the processes? Are we able, you mentioned, Fatima, the human aspect, and this is the mentality in a way. Do you think this can be sort of a groundbreaking event that can make us think differently?
Yes, so what happens now is, and also what I've experienced from my own research, is that a lot of money and a lot of funds are just focusing the funding towards COVID-19, so towards virus, and it's kind of sad that we're not doing the same with the problems that we have known about before. because if and it's again human nature that we now there's competition. The competition element is quite huge here. And we've seen it before. We've seen it in the Manhattan Project, for example, where there was a competition about making the first atomic bomb. And we saw how when you put together a lot of scientists, the most brilliant scientists, and fund them in a very intense way, they will be able to deliver results. And that's what we need with AMR and with the other challenges we have. We need to intensify our efforts and not wait until we are in the problem before we start funding or before we pay attention to researchers and scientists.
That means, Fatima, you say that the competition, the race now to become the first one, perhaps to find a functioning vaccine, that's a good race, because we focus on that and we increase our pace. Do you see any risk elements in this? Maybe to both of you, could we be too fast? Will that sometimes we have the challenge between pace and quality? Is that a risk element?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, because we skipped some key process for developing fast for the vaccines, for example, for COVID-19. But safety issues can be lost in this situation. We already experienced that.
Yeah. Fatima, I don't know if you would like to comment?
Yes, exactly. Like the safety issues, like so Yoon is saying, it's a great problem we are facing, because like for vaccines, how will we know the long-term consequences if we are in a hurry to provide the first vaccine on the market? This is one thing, and also in research. So we've seen a lot of papers, scientific articles being published, and they jump to conclusions too fast with no real basis or not really solid results. So we have a problem with this very intense competition, but I think in the long term, researchers are also very good in sorting out these deviations. So in general, I think competition is very good. And as I'm speaking, I'm actually worried that someone else will publish some of the research results I've been making or I've been developing in the lab regarding COVID-19. So it is an element of pushing us forward.
And you maybe to follow up, Yoon, we all read about how Korea has managed the COVID-19 pandemics. It's been very successful, and I think it has been. Do you think that has led to an increased awareness in Korea about? One thing is the standing in the healthcare, the global healthcare system, but has that increased a general higher knowledge and interest on affairs like this?
Actually, I think this time we very successful. But as you know, on 2015 we have a MERS outbreak.
Right.
At that time we was not such successful. So at that time we learned a lot. So we prepared after that MERS. So I think the other countries also can learn from these events, and they can preparing. After this event or during this event. Then next time we can. Overcome more better.
Which is a little bit back to the fact that we have been discussing that maybe we need an eye-opener. The MERS was an eye-opener in Korea, and you learned a lot from that. I would maybe, before opening for questions from the audience, maybe we have been touching upon ethical issues on a number of occasions in different areas with different approaches. How can we make sure that these developments, you told us, Fatima, well, this groundbreaking and very interesting developments in your company and the research that you're doing, but how can we make sure that these developments are not crossing international or national borders? Maybe you work with this on a daily basis, so maybe you can share your thoughts on this.
You mean that unethical things in some countries, but it can be accepted in other countries.
And to ensure that there are no legal issues in these sometimes very difficult questions.
Yes. I think we can make some example of the gene editing technology. In maybe 2 years ago in China, they make some baby using that technology. Maybe you can remember. Yeah, in this situation in China, it was permitted before before the other countries criticized that situations. So I think it is very common in cutting-edge technology because countries are competing. Yeah, so it is very important to have an organized ethical meetings or
framework
for
Can we? Is that sort of a framework that you see in the future, Fatima?
It's true that it depends on the country. So in Europe, we have the GDPR rules, and researchers now have to find out how to deal with this. In my opinion, it's actually sometimes hindering development, as Anu Jalanko said earlier today, that it's, for me, sometimes I want to do small studies with few patients just as a proof of concept. And that is hindered by all of the paperwork that needs to be done and all the approvals that needs to be carried on before I can start this small research project. And sometimes it's not even worth it because I use more time on this than doing real research. So I think there is place for improvement. It's of course important to make sure that the transparency is in place. But I think we really have a place for improvement also if you want to do cross-national collaborations where we have different rules in different places.
Thank you very much, Fatima. And maybe I'll turn also to see if we have received any questions. Yes, we do. We do. Okay, then I will leave you to come forward.
So a question from Solberg to Fatima. I wonder, what is the advantage of detecting chemicals that bacteria give and receive or send to each other rather than to detect the bacteria directly?
Sometimes it can be even more sensitive or it is more sensitive to detect it directly through DNA. But in real life, it takes a lot of time. It's very lab heavy, so you need to process the samples a lot before being able to reach this result. And the advantage of doing this using these chemicals that the bacteria send to each other is that it's possible to do it on the spot because you only need this chemical to be sent. You don't need to do more modifications of your sample, and this gives you a turnover time for the measurement itself that is much faster than when you send it off to a lab and wait for professional people to handle your samples.
We have another question for Fatima, this time by Bujin. So when will you commercialize your kits?
We are working on getting approvals. We are working on doing extended clinical trials and blinded studies. So the technology is in place, but we still need to get all of these studies confirming that it works on patients. And again, as the point was mentioned in the earlier session, that we need representative samples of the patients. So yeah, we still need to do some studies and of course get the approvals for using this.
Then we have a question for both speakers from Nina. So from a Korean and a Danish perspective, where is it most important for our societies to invest in order to combat AMR?
Maybe you will give a try first.
I don't think so. I think he first.
Okay, Fatima, did you heard the question
Yes.
as well?
I think it's important to find the key aspects of the AMR problem. So trying to think out of the box instead of finding more advanced antibiotics or better treatment strategies of the antibiotic resources. Maybe we should try to find alternatives for antibiotics. And also, again, the early diagnosis, if we can use small doses of antibiotics in the early stages before it gets out of hand, then maybe we'll be able to run on the existing antibiotic resource for a longer time until we figure out what to do with this problem.
Would you like to add anything?
In Korean situation, the hospital infections can be very important to prevent, so control the hospital infection, and physicians should take care about this, more attention for the AMR.
Which I think is a global issue. Hospital infections, I think, is one central aspect here. I don't know if we, I think one short question from the audience.
So a question to, mainly to Fatima from Nina. So are the pre-diagnosis kits already being used, and are you already working on alternatives to antibiotics?
I'm not at all working on alternatives on antibiotics, unfortunately, but I focus on diagnostic tools. So creating sensors that can detect and identify bacteria quickly in patient samples.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Time is running, and I would like to give the panelists one chance also to make perhaps some motivating words or a final statement at this stage. Maybe I can challenge you first, Jakob, with a few finalizing thoughts from your side.
Well, I think, well, we talked about competition between researchers, that's great, but I think we've also seen a tendency of nationalism, vaccine nationalism, etc. I mean, it is a fact that the closed borders and the restricted travel opportunities also means much less opportunities for researchers to meet. The conferences are not taking place. We can meet like this, but it's not like meeting, you know, traveling to meet in labs or discuss things, you know, over days, etc. So we have we who represent somehow governments, we have a duty to make sure that we come over this because. I mean, I mentioned before the global collaboration and open science, it's so incredibly important. So yes, there is a mobilization on COVID-19, but there are so many other diseases that we have heard about today that we need still to continue to work with. So that's a call to protect the global cooperation and open science from my side. Thanks.
Thank you, Jakob. So Yoon, maybe I will give the floor to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think COVID-19 makes many things change, and I think it makes some future very near here. And we make some new normals and untapped cultures. So many things can be changing. Maybe many infections can be decreased. We think that common cold can be decreased because we are wearing the mask. So I think we cannot expect the effect of this COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah, but we can make some new culture. We have our sense, and we can collaborate together. We can overcome.
Very positive aspect. Fatima, finally to you, what would be your final take or final statement for this evening?
I think that, again, each one of us should see what are we experts in, or what are our surroundings. Are we teachers? Are we scientists within something specific? Are we politicians? And then try maybe not to fight or combat everything on the 17 sustainable development goals, but just pick one thing that we can do something about and try our best, because it can be very overwhelming with all of the problems in the world, and sometimes you just think where to start. We are doomed here. But if we just pick one thing and try to do our best, then maybe we have a chance.
I think that sounds like a very positive, that we have a chance. That's a good thing to hear on an evening like this. Time is flying when we're having both fun and interesting discussions. And I think time has run too fast for us perhaps tonight. We're approaching 9 o'clock here in Seoul. I would like to convey my deepest gratitude to all the speakers in Denmark, in Finland, here in Seoul. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you all for very useful and very interesting and I think very useful insights in a lot of different areas that are quite advanced, but very important for all of us to know more about. I think this discussion today, or this evening, has shown us that we have come a long way in the Nordic countries. But I think all of us, we're still at the beginning of something that requires a lot of resources, a lot of energy, and not least a lot of cooperation in the years to come. We have to do this together. All of our societies, whether it's in the Nordic countries or in Korea, we are in front of major challenges. And we don't have all these solutions today. We have to find them along the way. We have to work hard to be able to solve some of these. We heard about the AMR issue, scary, but it also motivates all of us to work harder to find these solutions. Sharing data, sharing information, establish communication lines, be able to communicate, whether it's to stop the communication between bacteria or to establish communication between people. I think that's always an important issue. I think we also have demonstrated that we can play an important role in finding relationship and establishing important contacts, important communications in areas that indeed are important for all of us, whether we are living in this or this country. And I think this means that together we can pave a way for future solutions. All of you, both your audience, the audience that you have been following us on the computers, thank you for sending in questions. Thank you for showing engagement. Thank you for the presence from the live audience today. Thank you, panelists. And I would also like to thank especially all of those who have been working hard to make this evening come through. We all know that it's lots of work into an event like this. Thank you so much. We have a new event coming up in 1 month's time. Please follow us then. There will be new events coming up. So the best way to do this is to sign up for our newsletter, which is www.nordictalkskorea.com. Thank you very much all for being with us, and very important, take care, have a nice evening, and stay safe. Good night.